You are listening to the Sovereign and Soul podcast. I'm your host, Maykel Reese. I have been a soul and sovereignty coach for over 6 years, and we are bringing it to the airwaves because it's so necessary to talk about this work, to talk about how if you know the truth about you, that empowers you. And that's what I do. That's what I do as a guide and as a coach. I teach you about you. You will learn what you need. You will learn how to heal yourself. I will remove those blocks with you for you to find your most fulfilled life. Let's dive in. We're going to tune in and we're going to need this one because we're going to talk about some big shit today. So wherever you are, and if you are in a place where you can close your eyes, if it feels right to you, do that. If you've got your legs crossed, uncross your legs. Put both feet on the ground and just guide your attention to your breath. There's no need to alter or change it. Just notice. See if you can become aware of the sensation of your lungs rising and falling. And just be here for a moment. I want you to guide your attention into the palms of your hands and see if you can notice the presence or absence of sensation. And then I want you to take a moment and call back all parts of you to this present moment and to your body. Call all the parts of yourself home that are in the future, that are in the past, and anchor them here in this present moment. Everything that you need to get done will be waiting for you. Just be here. Take a few more conscious breaths. And then I want you to notice what emotions are present in your body. Name them. And then once you've named them, notice where they are in your body, where you're experiencing them. And then if it feels right to you, you can offer some gentle touch to your body. Just acknowledging that these emotions are here. Most times we do not have the bandwidth or the safety to fully meet our emotions. The acknowledgement is enough in the moment. Some will need tending later, but this is what it looks like. This is available to you throughout your entire day, always. When things are hard, when things are overwhelming, you get to stop for just a moment, even if it's just 30 seconds to a minute. Just take 3 conscious breaths. So, I want to talk about men. I am a straight woman, and I was raised by a first wave feminist. And I am not unaware of how much oppression women have been under for generations. I'm not unaware of what women have been through, because I have experienced it, and I have the ancestral knowledge in my body of all the women before me. And I also have all the lived experiences that women hear from each other, and we understand it. I know what we've been through and what we continue to go through. We deserve so much softness. We deserve to rest. We deserve to not have to consciously and continuously use our energy to make sure that we know that our worth. It's a lot of work. And there's so many things that being a woman have been discounted for so long, and discounted is not a big enough word. When I first started having children, I had a boy first. It's great. I didn't really care either way. I was just excited. And then I had another boy. Wonderful. So great. Already had the clothes for that. And then I got pregnant a third time. And I went to the ultrasound where they were going to tell me what the gender was. And they told me it was a girl. And I jumped off the table and started jumping up and down. And the tech and my kid's dad were like, "What are we doing?" And I was like, "There are balls in here somewhere." I was not even close to being aware enough to understand the reaction that I had when I heard I was having a girl. But I didn't want to have a girl. I just didn't know why. And in my brain, it was kind of like, well, I'm a boy's mom, and I have all the things, and like, now it's like a whole different game. And so, that was halfway through-ish, the pregnancy. And then I didn't buy her a thing, and I like to buy things. I was just sure that they had read it wrong, and I could feel this like looming sense of something. And again, I was in a really rough spot, mentally speaking. This is right before my own personal breakdown, whatever you want to call it. And so she was born. And the moment I heard her cry, I said, "Is it a girl?" And everybody laughed at me because of course it was. We knew this. And she was born, and she stayed up all night staring at me. We just stared at each other all night long. She didn't sleep. She didn't cry either. And we just stared at each other. And then I proceeded to have the worst postpartum that I had had yet, and became suicidal and had my full breakthrough. Now, this wasn't all caused because I was having a girl. I'm just giving you some context as to what we're about to talk about. As I broke through, and the breakdowns, they generally lead to a breakthrough. These rock bottoms that we try to avoid and wish weren't happening, they become our opening for freedom and to live fully the way that we were meant to. And so I was in therapy at the time and just learning about all the things. And I realized that I had unconsciously decided that my boys were going to be fine because the world was made for them. And that I didn't have to actually love myself. I did not have to do the work to feel through my trauma, to see myself fully, because my boys were going to be just fine. Because they don't know, right? Boys can't see what their mothers don't want them to see. This was my belief at the time. But I did know as a daughter that I knew how my mother felt about herself. I knew without her telling me. And I watched her. And so what I had been afraid of was, I'm going to have to love myself if I want my daughter to love herself. I don't want my daughter to hate her body her whole life, so I'm going to have to love my body. I don't want my daughter to give away big pieces of herself and just to make everyone else happy. So I'm going to have to do that. And that was the most terrifying thing to me. But then as I started down this and, she was kind of the reason, I was like, oh, actually, I want all these things for myself. I would like to love my body because I love it. I would like to know I'm worthy because I know it and not necessarily for anyone else. But then my oldest was probably 6. And it occurred to me that I was watching him be so tender. I was watching him cry when he was sad, and I was watching him emote the way that human beings do. And it occurred to me that for however many generations women have been oppressed, we have been conditioning little boys to not feel their feelings. And it starts as early as 4 years old. Boys are told to stop crying. That boys don't feel like that. Now, this is not news, right? We know that there's been these arbitrary guidelines around what girls can do and what boys can do. But because men have been the oppressors, we aren't talking about what happened to them. And there's a good reason for that. But it's time. Raising my sons gave me a view of feminism that I don't know that I would have. I don't think I'd have it otherwise. I didn't know that men were born with this innate tenderness. In fact, it surprised me to see it. I didn't know that they were that in tune. And when I tell you it surprised me that my boys were so, and still are, intuitive of what I'm feeling, blows my mind still. It doesn't surprise me that my daughter is. But do you see where that's mine to undo? And so if we are talking about white males as public enemy number 1, which we are, that is what is being said. And it's not inaccurate either. We do need to step back and say, what happened to them? Because if everybody came into this life whole and worthy, which they did, there's nothing wrong with any being that has come onto this planet. Anything that was wrong with them was taught to them. If they are public enemy number 1, then they need healing. Something happened to them too. And this is this very unpopular conversation that I want to have, because what does it even look like to acknowledge the suffering that someone has caused, that a group of people have caused, while acknowledging that that group also suffered? And that's a really difficult thing for human beings to hold. Partly because we're just barely coming out of such intense oppression for so many years. But my optimism around this is we are learning so much quicker than we ever have, because every generation before us has made it that much easier to implement the things that we learn. And it's speeding up. So why can't we acknowledge the pain and the suffering of those that are oppressed, while we say the people causing the oppression are also in pain and suffering? And this is kind of where I wish it was a call-in show, so that it's yeah, I want to hear what you're saying. But on the other, I do want to introduce this topic as all of us need the space to heal. And people, if we're talking about groups, they need time and space to heal as well, just like the individual. So our oppressors need to be held accountable for what they did. Continue to do. But are we taking that to the extreme of, we want to see you suffer the way that we did? When we talk about enlightenment and transcendence, my belief is that those things say, I suffered. I learned from it. I'm now going to walk differently in the world so that this pattern doesn't repeat. And to me, that looks like what is happening with the individual in an emotional healing sense. We are now in an age where you can talk about therapy openly and it's awesome. Like, ladies want to date a dude that goes to therapy, right? Like, we're here. Is it so far-fetched to say that we could begin to imagine what it would look like to offer healing spaces to oppressors? And I think maybe the question is, well, only if they're willing to acknowledge. That's fair. But I do think there's a component here that gets left out and is really difficult to do. And that is, when you meet an oppressor who is still wanting to oppress, can you understand within yourself that they are acting out of a hatred for themselves because of what happened to them? And this can get real messy because it sounds like victim blaming. I'm saying that the shift is something that is possible because of what you have been through, and that the people who have been oppressed actually have an easier time healing because we have understanding. We've been opened up in that way. So what would it look like to hold space for men? And it doesn't mean that you are letting them get away with anything. You're not bypassing. I mean it. What would it look like to hold space? And that this is the first generation where we have said, yeah, what happened to you when you were a kid was not okay. And that toxic masculinity was actually just emotional, psychological, and physical abuse. And then can we look at where the need for justice and the need for fairness has caused us to want all the power and caused us to think that we're better than, when we know better than that. And so in talking about this patriarchy, feminism, it's always interesting to me that feminism has been labeled femme, right? And has something to do with the female, when the definition of it is, do you believe in the equality for both sexes? I don't really understand that. And that patriarchy, right, is just men, when really what it is power and control. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about patriarchy. And we can't allow that to come into feminism, because then it's just patriarchy flipped on its head. One coin, same side. The medicine of the embodied feminine understands. It understands how to draw a clear boundary. But then there is also a space for those who are trying to learn. And that now, there's a lot of men who are in this space of, well, I can't do anything right. And you know what? They are actually waking up to that all of the men in their lineage were the problem. They were the oppressor. And they're horrified because they didn't choose it, but here it is. And now they know. So it's like, I don't even know how to move. If we act in a way that causes them to think that they are bad no matter what, the monster that will come out of that will be something that we have never seen. If we take this time to nurture, to allow, but in a kind way, which means that you don't withhold the truth. It's the energy with which you give it. And so when you do that, you're allowing for someone to do better. And that's what's needed. And so we are all just human beings. And there is a spectrum of gender. But right now, straight men and straight women are still holding the most power. And they are white. And this isn't a judgment. It's not supposed to be incendiary. It's just what's happening. And so I have had the honor, truly, of being the emotional coach to several men. A lot now, actually. And they taught me something that I have never known before. One is it's just that they're in pain, like a lot. And the psychological damage that was done to them is different than what was done to women. But it's still damage, it's still trauma. And so this conversation that I have been truthfully kind of scared to have is because there isn't a solution. I'm not offering this like, well, this is how we do it. I'm saying, can we be aware? Can we hold space for ourselves while simultaneously holding space for other people? Can there be acknowledgement? Can we allow for that? Can we allow them to say, yes, this happened. And yes, I can see where I'm still playing into parts of these roles. And I don't mean to. And where we can encourage them to do better. And that we also have things that we need to work on. When you cause another human being to experience the fullness of the shame of what they have done, that's one thing. And it's more the question of, can we create a safe space for them to experience the shame? Because shame is a necessary emotion sometimes. Can we create the safe space for them to feel it, but then to transmute it? Shame is an emotion that is meant to cause change in us. That feeling of being ashamed, that is meant for us to go, oh, that is so painful. I need to look at this and redirect. When we cause people to carry the weight of the shame and the guilt around with them forever, this is what creates monsters. Can we create safe spaces for people to learn the things that they need to learn and not be beholden to it and weighed down by it for the rest of their lives? So in short, can we allow change? And do you think it's possible? I'm seeing so much beauty in the generations that are coming up. My kids' age. It's unreal, the things that they are talking about and doing that we didn't do. That's what we want. But for those of us that grew up, whether you're a millennial or Gen Z or whatever, Gen X, You still have life left to live. It's not over. There's still so much healing that can happen. There's still so much change that can be made. But can we stop identifying with these labels? Can we stop identifying with a cause, making ourselves right and making another group wrong? Can it be enough that it's just true that women have been oppressed for centuries? And so without first wave feminists, without all these things, we wouldn't be here. But the point wasn't to continue that. The point was to build on it, because every generation does things differently. We're supposed to. And so now with the information age that's been around for a while, but with all this information, with everything that we know, that mental health is now completely normalized, that we can talk about, for crying out loud, McCormick sponsors witches on Instagram. The Salem witch trials were not that long ago. We have come a really long way. Do we really want more suffering? Suffering has been very misunderstood. Pain is a part of life. From minor pain to major pain, it's just a part of it. The suffering comes when we don't want to experience the pain in the first place. Avoidance. Right? So, can we start to really experience clean pain? Can we let it not get infected? Can we allow for our lived experiences, our pain that is so real, but that so is theirs? Men are not these terrible creatures who only have a few emotions and can't, fill in the stereotypes about men. It's what they've been conditioned to be. Just like women. We were given a set of rules and we followed them to belong. The same is true for them. The difference is they've been in power for a really long time. But there is possibility all of a sudden, because of all of the work, because of the incredible and courageous women that preceded us. We're at a point now where we get to say, it's time. And it's that wisdom to know that the same oppression and to wallow and to suffer is not the medicine. It is to create the ability, the space to change and heal and to not have it held against you forever. This is consciousness. This is love and light and shadow all at once. And then can we have this conversation without slinging insults at each other? Can you hear this and have it trigger you and not take it out on someone? And know that this is such a tender topic for a reason. Can you sit with it? And then this also looks like learning good boundaries. So trying something different, trying something new in the way of like taking the wisdom from everything that has happened. And we don't want history to repeat itself. And there's a lot of talk of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. For me, it is the embodied masculine and the embodied feminine, because my belief system says we're all divine whatever that means for you. But it is about how do we actually use that in our bodies to walk in this world. And so we're fully present in our bodies, being the fullness of whatever that means for you. And all of us have both traits in us. And so how do we then start a different conversation? What does it look like? What does it look like where the things that have been demonized about men are starting to be seen in a different light and understood, both by men and by women? What does it look like to have a new conversation where we say, this is what we know about ourselves to this point, women. This is what we know that we will talk about. And then allowing a conversation to happen to a point and then kind of giving it a rest for a moment. So what I mean is, we want so much for this divide to dissolve. We want so much to be unified and just let each other be, but that's going to require us to do something different. So when we're thinking about how to create a safe space for men, what does that look like? For me, it's been looking at my own shadow. It's been looking at the ways that I have been oppressed. It's been looking by the pain that I have experienced from men and meeting it fully. I've held myself through grieving the losses that these things have caused. And by doing that, as I'm raising sons, as male clients come to me, I'm able to hold it in a different way because I no longer need protection from that. What I know is that what is within men is absolutely divine. It is powerful and it is needed in a harmonized way. And look, we need this across the board. Whoever you are, whatever way you came to this planet, we need you to be the most harmonized version of you, not anybody else. Because when you are in harmony with yourself, it is the same thing as being at peace. And when you are at peace with yourself, you are the embodied warrior that only fights when it is absolutely necessary. And we don't like to call out that part. We just want there should be no fighting ever. Well, that's not really happening yet. And so this aggression in men that's been so demonized is just like the anger and rage within all of us. Have you met it? Do you understand that this is a power for you to hone, for you to understand, and for you to be the master of? We need harmonized human beings. So wherever you are, man, woman, wherever you land on the spectrum, can you be fully that? Can you tend to yourself so that when you go out, you are creating spaces, and you may not even have to do it consciously because you would never allow someone to treat you that way because you know your worth. So you'd walk away. And in doing so, teaching them that they can do the same. We're all unique. We are all different. Every single one of us. And that's what we have in common. The commonalities between us are more similar than our differences. The differences were created And so now I want to create spaces for men. I want them to be able to heal. I want them to be able to understand what happened to them. Because once you understand, that is the wisdom that you need. That's the alchemy that we're talking about. That's transmutation. When you understand and can, it's not about really letting it go. It changes just into this, like, that happened. I got the lesson and I'm releasing the pain and the emotion that I felt around it. And I'm allowing it to help me become this harmonized being. I want to create spaces and help create them and model them where all beings get to be who they are. And that there is room for people to learn and grow. And this isn't the kumbaya commune that you might be picturing. This is where boundary work comes in. You meet yourself, and then you know how you will be treated and how you will not. You understand your worth, and so it almost becomes simple at that point. You won't be doing things to prove your worth. That's when we can really create these courageous spaces, is when once we've created them within ourselves. Men are not the enemy. Anything that we have deemed as an enemy is something for us we need to sit down for a minute. Maybe even go to bed and then get up and think about it just a little bit more. Creating enemies is something that humans are excellent at. But now we know better. We know that kindness does not mean that we give up parts of ourselves. It means that I hold my boundary and I respect yours. And that is the kind of excellent resistance that brings a new strength up within communities. When the individual can say, no, thank you, in a grounded, substantial no. And that I respect your need to live that way. That creates something so potent where we start to understand that we don't have to define the way that others live. And so right now, anything that's like, well, that would never happen or that's impossible. It's only because you haven't allowed for that magic third thing. So there's always this, well, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. There's always a magic third thing. And really, there's so many other possibilities that we don't allow because we are certain of the outcome and we are certain that we are right. So what would it look like? What would it look like to take feminism and turn it into humanism? Where the belief system is, all beings deserve equal rights. All living beings deserve emotional, psychological, and physical respect and safety. Can you imagine? Because that's really what everyone is wanting. But we are still allowing our fear to drive and scarcity to drive and shame to drive. Because of the fear of what if we try and it doesn't work? And I would rather be right. Instead of the fullness of it of what if you are right? And you are. Women have been oppressed for ever. It seems like. I think it seems like it because it is it. So you're right. It's done. You're correct. But leave space. Leave possibility that you weren't right about every single piece of it. Whatever you do to others, you do to yourself. So our oppressors, they are also in pain. And imagine if they were harmonized. If we all were. None of this means that we don't pay attention to social justice issues. None of this means that you allow someone to harm you or take advantage. It means that we stop villainizing everyone, including the villains. And we ask ourselves, what happened to them? So I've been lucky enough to have many male clients who have done the work. And it was really difficult. Getting to witness that changes things. It changed me because I can see that it's possible now. Can there be trust in a different future? Can there be adherence to values like love one another that have not been practiced yet? Can we practice them now? Because now we understand that love isn't this boundaryless, I'll give you whatever just so that everybody gets along. There's not any of that anymore. This healing is available to us. Will there be resistance? Of course. But in this moment, my hope is that we can pause and say, where have I identified with a certain cause, with a certain extreme? Because it feels good to be right. And then, if you have done that, which we all have, it's where are the pains and the hurt in me that I haven't met yet and held and acknowledged. It's always about going back in first. And then holding that possibility. Like maybe there's more. So this is a conversation that I hope we can continue to have. And one that I don't want to have alone. I always want to hear. I will say a lot. I'm like, okay, let's hear your argument. Let's hear it. So comment. Tell me what I don't know. The conversation needs to start. So let's have it. As always, you can work with me. You can find me on Instagram at Maykel Reese. You can find me on TikTok, Maykel C. Reese, my website, maykelreese.com, or to listen to this podcast some more. It is Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Be gentle with yourselves.